Setting goals is incredibly important, and we're taught how to set goals. But one thing that we're not taught is how to set values and standards and principles for ourselves. And like I said, goals are important and they're essential, but in my personal opinion, and I made a TikTok talking about this, but they're only part of the equation. Imagine your goal being like a destination on a map. They're important, but they're only useful if you have a compass or a sense of direction to guide you there. And that's where principles, values, and one's personal standards really come into play. Goals are typically outcomes. Hit this target, reach that number, achieve this milestone. But the nature of goals is that they're temporary and they're ever evolving. You set a goal, you work towards it, and once you achieve it, you set another goal. And that cycle can, of course, lead to progress, but it can also lead to feeling disconnected if you aren't anchored by something deeper. Without a core foundation of values and standards that you have for yourself, and these are personal, but without them, you can hit goals and still feel unfulfilled. And you may achieve success, but not even recognize yourself in the process. Personal values are the beliefs and principles that matter most to you. Things like integrity, things like courage, things like operating with complete honesty and a pure heart. And our standards are the behavioral expressions of those values. They dictate how you act, not just what you aim for. And when you take the necessary time to clarify your values and decide what standards you'll hold for yourself, you're not just setting direction, you're shaping your identity. And this process isn't something that is quick. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, why I think people ignore this or don't do this. But this isn't something that you rush. Just like when you set goals, it's not something that you can just quickly pick. If you actually want to get to your goal, being intentional about the kind of goals that you're setting, in my opinion, is very important. You create this framework for decision making when you have values, when you have certain principles or standards that you live by. And your values become this internal compass that you can lean on, especially when motivation fades or you face certain resistance or challenges as you take action toward your goals, for example. And even beyond getting to your goals, these principles, these values, these standards that you hold internally, they're your internal compass, and you're able to lean on them as you're just going throughout your life, the way that you interact with other people, the way that you approach life generally, the way that you want to operate. Goals shape your future. Your values shape your character, and your character is what sustains you on the road to your goals. When your actions align with your values, there's this congruency, and you're going to feel more at ease with yourself because you're not living in conflict with yourself. You're acting in ways that are in alignment with who it is you would like to be. And inevitably, that's going to give you more confidence. That's going to make you feel more at ease. That's going to allow you to be more disciplined because your behavior is anchored in identity, not just desire for a specific outcome. That's going to give you drive to continue to take action even when you're facing resistance or even when you face certain challenges that inevitably are going to come up on the road to, bettering yourself. All it's about is who you are. That's what it's about at the end of the day. I'm sure you've probably heard people say, you don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. And it's the truth. Who you are being is the most important thing. What you value, what your principles are, what your standards are, that's going to determine how you view the world, what you believe. And over time, of course, it's going to influence your behavior and your actions, which of course dictate your results. Now, there are a few reasons why I feel like most people don't take the time to necessarily define their values or set personal standards. And I think one of the most common reasons is because it's internal and it's not visible. Goal setting is tangible. Value work or principle work or standard work, however you want to call it, is internal. And I feel like because it's internal, it's invisible to the outside world. It may be not productive for some people. especially in the world that we live in that's so focused on like external result, external result, external result. And another big reason why I feel like people kind of ignore this kind of stuff is just because it's uncomfortable. Like, you have to look within, and sometimes looking at what you truly value forces you to confront areas where you're out of alignment. When you look internally and clarify, what's important to you, who it is you would like to be, you're also probably going to discover ways in which you are acting that aren't in alignment with who it is you would like to be. And that may be uncomfortable for some people, but that's ultimately how you grow. When you develop a better relationship with yourself and you start figuring out, more about who it is you are and who it is you would ultimately like to be and how you want to show up in the world. Figuring this kind of stuff out, developing a better relationship with yourself isn't easy. You have to spend time by yourself. You have to go quiet and look internally. And for a lot of people, that's just uncomfortable, something that they're unwilling to do. At the end of the day, I think why values and standards matter so deeply is because they give us direction even when our goals are unclear. A clear goal can give you direction and purpose, of course. But what happens when we don't have goals? What happens when we don't know what it is we want? What happens if we don't know what we're aiming for? When you have a list of values, 5 to 10 things that you would like to embody every day, that gives us purpose. That gives us direction. Even when our goals are unclear, even if you don't know exactly where you're going, your values keep you moving in the right direction. Even when goals feel far off, or even when they're delayed, your standards, your values, your principles keep you grounded in meaningful action. Action that's backed by a deeper purpose, which is so important when you really think about it. And, when you're operating from your values, you're operating from your principles, you don't need to think twice about certain decisions that you have to make. Your values make the call for you. Does this thing align with my values? Yes or no? If I said this, does that align with my values? Yes or no? If I went there, would that align with my values? Yes or no? If I associated myself with this group of people, does that align with my values? Yes or no? Things become very clear once you figure out what's really important to you. So of course, set goals, but also make sure that you're taking the necessary time to define your values, your standards, your principles. Because when who you are aligns with what it is you want, success isn't just achievable, it becomes inevitable. And every single step that you take is fulfilling in and of itself because you're acting in ways that are in alignment with who it is you want to be. And the more often you act in ways that are in alignment with who it is you want to be, the more confidence you're going to have, the easier it'll be to make decisions, the more at peace you'll be with yourself. And that's success. That's fulfillment. It's in the present moment. It's rooted in the now. It's not in some goal externally. Goals can give you clear direction. They can, especially if you feel like you're drifting or you're lacking focus. But the thing is that they're temporary. They're circumstantial. They're external. They tell you where to go, but they don't tell you who to be while you get there. Your values, on the other hand, your principles, your standards, these are your internal compass. These things have the opportunity to direct your actions regardless of the external goal. Your goals are going to change. Like I said before, you'll set a goal, you'll work towards that goal, you'll achieve that goal, and then very soon after, you'll probably have a new goal, and that process will just continue and continue and continue, which is great. But the thing about values is that they're consistent. They may change slightly over time as you grow, they may grow with you, but they're consistent and they apply across your entire life. A goal you may have in one specific area or a few specific areas, your relationship, your career, your health, whatever it is. Values look over everything. They cover everything. So think of it this way. This is at least how I think about it. Goals give you a point on a map. They're a destination on a map. Values, principles, standards, that's the compass. That's the compass you follow, regardless of the map, to get you where it is you see yourself going. If you want direction that lasts beyond your next win, beyond the next accomplished goal, get clear on what your values are, what your standards are, and what your principles are. Getting clear on what your values are isn't something you rush. It's not a to-do list item that you should feel like you just have to, check off and complete. This is something that you should take, some time really figuring out, whether that's a few hours or a few days or even a few weeks. Slow down, get quiet, and actually listen to yourself. These values aren't things that you feel like you should value, not what social media tells you is important, but like what genuinely matters to you beneath all the noise. Maybe sit with a journal without any distractions, without your phone, and just be completely honest with yourself and ask yourself, what kind of person do I admire? Not for what they have, but for how they live, how they carry themselves, or how it looks like they carry themselves. What do I admire most in other people? Think of people you truly respect, not just because they have, fancy, shiny things, whatever, but because of how they operate. What kind of qualities do these people embody? What standards do they hold themselves to? What about them makes you say, this is who I want to be? The traits that you admire in others often reflect the values that you want to live by. So take a look at people who you admire the most and then ask yourself, these questions. Take some quiet time and just be open and honest with yourself. List and define some personal values, and just, on the top of my head, whether it's living with courage, integrity, living with a growth mindset, having discipline in your life, creativity, respect, loyalty, faith. Think of things, certain traits or values that are important to you. What do these things mean to you? What does it look like to live by these things in one's day-to-day life? Like in action, what does it look like to embody these values or principles? What would it feel like if you're acting in a way that's in alignment with these values or principles or standards? If something that you value is discipline, living with purpose, having a mission in life, the standard for that is doing what needs to be done whether you feel like it or not. A value without action is just a word. Turn your values into standards or principles you live by. I'm looking at my notes app right now, and I have 14 core standards and values that I live by, things that I got clear on. I can wholeheartedly say that I try my best every single day to operate with these core values, these core standards. These are things that I clearly define and things that are important to me and ways that I want to carry myself. So ask yourself, what is genuinely important to me, and how can I prove to myself that this should be a value in my life, something that I genuinely care about and something that I'm going to display with my actions and prove to myself that I actually do care about it. What's important to note here is that your values aren't just for journaling. They're not just for, your laptop. They're meant to guide action. They're meant to actually influence the way that you show up in the world, your character. So use them to make decisions. Remind yourself of them as you're going throughout the course of your day. When you feel like things are out of alignment, you can always lean on these values, these standards, these principles to hopefully put you back into alignment. You don't find your values. You clearly define what those things are when you take inventory and are intentional and actually start building a relationship with yourself. Once you define what your values are, they'll stop you from drifting. They'll stop you from being unable to make decisions. It'll help you live with clarity. It'll help you be more consistent, and it'll give you more self-respect and confidence. So, like I said, goals are great. Set goals, that's incredible, but also take the necessary time to set values, set principles, and set standards for yourself. And I think that'll make a world of a difference also. So this is something that I've done for myself. It's something that I continue to do. Like I said, I'm looking at my notes right now on my computer. I have about 14 that I remind myself of, and I try my best to live in alignment with these values every single day. And when I face resistance or I feel like I'm out of alignment with my vision, who it is I'd like to be, I remind myself, okay, this is how I want to live. This is how I want to show up. I read that list that I've gotten clear on, and it brings me back into alignment. Nobody's perfect. If you act in ways that aren't necessarily in alignment with your values, that's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. It's just about being honest with yourself and trying to be as consistent as you can be. We're all a work in progress. Nobody's perfect. It's just about getting back to it whenever it is you can, getting back into alignment by, acting in a way that's in alignment with who it is you want to be. And it's as simple as that. So I hope you got some value from listening to this. If you have any comments or questions or anything like that, you can always DM me on Instagram at Presence of Being. I respond to all my DMs. You can message me on TikTok at samwisebrod_. If you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube, doing that definitely will help me get this message out. Liking the video, commenting, all of that stuff helps a lot. If you enjoy listening to these recordings and you're listening on Spotify or Apple, leaving a positive review on the podcast also does a lot. And if you're interested in supporting what we're building here at Presence of Being, you can go to presenceofbeing.co and grab a hat. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Hope you're having a great day wherever you're listening to this. And I will see you in the next recording very, very soon.